is still off. Uh, still figuring out how to navigate OBS. It is a steep learning curve. So you should be able to hear me now. Let me check. Uh, oh no. It seems that I am not, in fact, audible. What is going on? That's not what I meant to do. Just bear with me for a bit. I am audible. Oh, there it is. There it goes. Yeah, alright. Awesome. Let me pull chat up here again real quick. We can do some chatting for a bit since there's some people here now. Oh, I didn't put my pendant on. Alright, so, yes, Grumpy Queer. There is a demonstration against Mary Miller, a counter-protest, just outside of Decatur, I'm to understand, that I'm going to be attending. I am relishing the opportunity to have a live Mary Miller Land episode. Okay. Ah, that sucks. Alright, let me pull up the introduction real quick. I spent so much time writing. Friends, enemies, assorted potted plants. I'm Ron, that's Snuggles, and there is a lot of news out there. In a very real way, there is too much news. You have mainstream news networks like NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox, NPR, and even ECT. You have online news organizations like the Young Turks and Vox and PolitiFact. You even have straightforward misinformation peddlers like the Daily Wire and Breitbart and CBN. And that's to say nothing of all kinds of podcasts or YouTube videos or late-night talk show hosts or even various comedy sketches. It's a lot. Oh, fuck's sake. It's a lot. In a very real way, it's too much. I'm not going to tell you that I've gone through everything, but I have gone through a lot of it, especially today. Some of it just isn't worth going through. I'm not going to bore you with whatever is on CBN, but I will tell you that I've gone through a bunch of the usual suspects, and I've found a handful of things that I think are interesting or important. So, I would also be remiss. I will also briefly remind you that if you inexplicably feel like this live stream is worth supporting and you have a couple of dollars you don't know what you're going to do with, I would be quite grateful if you are willing to send it my way. My computer, which is down there, roughly, is a bit old. It's in need of several upgrades. My CPU, my hard drives, and my graphics card are all 7 years old. They're from, like, 2017. I think my GPU might actually be from 2015. I don't specifically remember. If I'm upgrading all that, I'm also going to want to upgrade my motherboard to make sure everything works smoothly. which means that the only thing that I'm keeping from this computer is the great big case that I like so much, the brand new RAM cards that I bought, and the 700 watt power supply. Also, not for nothing, but I also have bills that I need to pay and groceries that I need to buy. So, actually, let me see real quick. The deal is that I start off with $50 for the week. If I get $50, all of that $50 goes to my groceries and my bills. Everything after that $50 gets split in half. Half of it goes to groceries and bills, half of it goes to buying a new computer. So if you send me very kindly, collectively, $150, then 100 of it would go towards bills and 50 of it would go towards the new computer. I'm looking and I haven't gotten anything this week, so we're still at 50, which is fine. I couldn't live stream yesterday because there was an emergency. Please only give me money if you have money to give. Mary Miller, Cedar Warning asks, just looked up Mary Miller from Illinois. Wow, she sucks in exceptional ways. Is she Q adjacent? I would not be surprised if she's Q adjacent, but I know her more for being just a straightforward white supremacist. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, she celebrated it on the basis that she was delighted that white babies were being protected now. And going over her newsletter, oh dear. But yeah, she's I would argue that she's more fascist than Marjorie Taylor Greene, just because she's more open about the fascist project. If you'd like, we can go over some old... during the break, I can play some old Mary Miller Land episodes from the shorts that I did, and also we can go over like her most recent news release. But that's going to have to wait until at least hour 2, because today is a special day. Normally I'd have a whole thing about how we're going over breaking news, but all of the breaking news today has been about the tariffs. And I feel like it would be irresponsible for me to not talk about that. But also, like, talk about it from a socialist or anarchist perspective. So I read a bunch of articles about the tariffs, and I came up with that. And that is what we will be doing now. Am I still audible? I should be. Huzzah. Okay, so this is an article from the AP. Let me put it in the chat for anyone who wants to read it. Dow drops 16,000 points, or 1,600 points, as U.S. stocks lead worldwide sell-off after Trump's tariffs cause a COVID-like shock. COVID-like. One of the things that a lot of these things stress is that there hasn't been a shock like this since COVID. But we'll get into that. So, New York, reporting from the AP. Wall Street shuddered at a level of shock unseen since COVID outbreak tore through the financial markets worldwide. Thursday on Wow, that was a bad reading. Wall Street shuddered, and a level of shock unseen since COVID's outbreak tore through financial markets worldwide Thursday on worries about the damage President Trump's newest set of tariffs could do to economies across continents, including his own. The S&P sank more than 4.8%, more than in major markets across Asia and Europe, for its worst day since the pandemic crashed the economy in 2020. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 1,679 points, or 4%, and the Nasdaq Composite tumbled 6%. Little was spared in financial markets as fear flared about the potentially toxic mix of weakening economic growth and higher inflation that tariffs can create. Everything from crude oil to big tech stocks to the value of the US dollar against other currencies fell. Even gold, which hit record highs recently as investors sought something safer to own, pulled lower. Some of the worst hits walloped smaller U.S. companies, and the Russell 2000 index of smaller stocks dropped 6.6% to pull more than 20% below its record. So the thing about that's all a bunch of highfalutin numbers, percentages, and stuff like that. All of that is 20% or more of those various values. 5%, or 1/20th of all those various values. And a thing that needs to be stressed here, right, and I'm going to stress this throughout, is that the concern isn't necessarily the concern that people have, the concern that these people have, the people who work in these industries have, isn't that stocks are going to lose value. It's that they're going to gain value slowly. There's this thing that Stephanie Sterling says frequently. For corporations, making some money isn't enough. Making a lot of money isn't enough. They have to make all the money. And so that's bad for them. But it is actually even worse than it sounds, because a lot of these places were already on a downward slope. Right, yeah, no, this is the next thing. Back in March, about a month ago, Wall Street tumbled 10%. 10% of its total value, I'm supposing. And there's a, let's read this bit. A 10% drop is a big enough deal that professional investors have a name for it. A correction. And the S&P 500's 1.4 slide on Thursday set the index to its first since 2023. The losses came after Trump upped the stakes in his trade war by threatening huge taxes on European wines and alcohol. Not even a double shot of good news on the U.S. economy could stop the bleeding. The turbulence is a result of uncertainty about how much pain Trump will let the economy endure through tariffs and other policies in order to reshape the country and the world as he wants. The president has said that he wants manufacturing jobs back in the United States, along with smaller U.S. government workforce and other fundamental changes. So this was written on March 13th. You can see it there. You can see it there, right? You can see the highlight I'm making. I'm sure you can. This was back in March. So it's been volatile for a month, and in a very real way. Volatility is even worse than just things going down or up. And the way to explain that, the way that it was explained to me, is that you think of the economy as a body, and you think of stock exchanges as the heart of that economy. When a heart rate is going up and down and up and down, and you can't control it, there's a name for that kind of behavior. It's called a heart attack. And when you're in the middle of a heart attack, it's something you have to it's worse than a person not having a heart attack, but it's also worse than after the heart attack is done, because when the heart attack is done, you can at least resuscitate someone, hypothetically. or you know either way if you can resuscitate it or not, if you can resuscitate the person or not. So the people who are working in the economy every day, working in the stock markets, they're working in such a way as to try to keep the economy running in spite of how bad it seems. This is also reflected in the writing. It says markets may be actually underreacting. Markets may actually be underreacting, especially if these rates turn out to be final, given the potential knock-on effects of global consumption and trade. This is from Sean Sun, a portfolio manager at Thornburg Investment and Management, who sees Trump's announcement on Wednesday as more of an opening move than an endpoint for policy, which is optimistic. Another thing to mention here, like I said before that companies are still making money. The concern is not that companies will stop making money, but that they will make less money slowly. This is also something expressed in the writing. The U.S. economy at the moment is still growing, of course. A report on Thursday said fewer U.S. workers applied for unemployment benefits last week. Economists had been expecting to see an uptick in joblessness, and a relatively solid job market has been the linchpin keeping the economy out of recession. A separate report said that activity for U.S. transportation, finance, and other businesses in the industry grew last month. But the growth was weaker than expected, and businesses gave a mixed picture of how they see conditions. Worries about a potentially stagnating economy and high inflation knocked down all kinds of stocks, leading to drops for 4 out of every 5 that make up the S&P 500. All told, the S&P fell 274.45 points to 5,396.52. The Dow Jones Industrial Average I don't have a subscription to the SJR. I'm very poor. So, no, I did not like about that. Did the SJR really not post about the tariffs at all? That's criminally irresponsible. No, I can't say that because that would be potentially libelous. That is wildly irresponsible of them. I can't believe that. But yeah. There's a list here that the AP helpfully provides of all the industries that are falling. I will let you browse that to your heart's content. But all of them are down. S&P fell, Dow Jones fell, Nasdaq fell, Russell 2000 fell, S&P is down, the Dow is down, the Nasdaq is down, the Russell is down. It's all down. It's all bad news for people who have money. So, I said before, I said like 10 minutes ago, I think, that the news on the economy is overwhelming. And it is. Oh, hey, they threatened this. They threatened. I read that. They changed it. Earlier today, this is what the headline for Politico was. And if you look at the news ticker over here, most of it is just There's this article from Politico which sums up most of the stuff that was in the AP article. This, their headline, or it was their headline for a while. I will paste this in the chat again. Read it at your leisure. This is about how Trump has no idea what he's doing on tariffs. And he isn't saying that to lawmakers, but he's sort of gesturing in that direction. Let's read a little bit of this. A list of White House talking points sent to Hill Republicans Thursday and obtained by Politico includes a raft of arguments that Trump is revolutionizing global trade and his trade actions will usher in a reshoring renaissance. The document is also deeply critical of the free trade policies that many Republicans have supported for decades and suggests that they argue that they were a failure. Some of the talking points are contradictory. The document argues the tariff will usher in a reshoring renaissance, like they said, expanding our manufacturing base and creating new high-paying jobs, while also claiming Trump is laser-focused on increasing foreign markets across the U.S. for stakeholders, and it's corpo speak, suggesting tariffs will eventually be lowered in some cases to maintain that market access. The document also asserts that Trump's actions will strengthen agricultural supply chains along with other trade, even as some Republicans on Capitol Hill note that the new wave of tariffs will drive up the cost of fertilizer, a key farm import, in the short term. And then there's this, which is, like I said, just summing up everything the AP said. I will post that in the chat. Even 404 Media is talking about how bad these tariffs are. That's how overwhelming this is. This is an article called The Sea of Idiocy. And it specifically talks about how the Trump tariffs are going to raise the price of the Switch 2. And there's not a whole lot to say. I'm just going to read the first paragraph because it's almost the entire article. Last week, Financial Times reported that Nintendo shifted half of its production capacities for the upcoming Switch 2 to Cambodia and Vietnam, in part to avoid Donald Trump's trade war on China. Wednesday morning, Nintendo formally announced the Switch 2 and its $449 price, which is $150 more than the Switch. A few hours later, Trump announced tariffs on the entire world, with particularly large fees on China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. So they tried to avoid it, and they couldn't avoid it. It's just, this whole thing is incredibly poorly thought out. There's a lot of analysis of the tariffs and where they come from and how they make no sense, but I'm going to leave that to more financially literate people, I'll say. I am not a financial literate. I am not one of those people. I'm an anarchist. I'm a socialist. I do anarchist socialist stuff. So, this is an article that talks about the economy broadly, but tariffs sort of generally. Not specifically. It's called A False Choice for Progressives, with the blurb saying Democrats don't have to decide between the abundance and anti-monopoly movements. It is written by Hannah Garden-Monnet, a former director of the FTC's Office of Policy Planning, as it says right here. Yep. And this article is about the complexity of economics. It frames it as an analysis of Ethan Klein's new book called, or Ezra Klein's new book called Abundance. Let's read a little bit of this. At a recent talk about his new book Abundance, Ezra Klein derided the anti-monopoly movement for a monomaniacal focus on antitrust, faulting anti-monopolists for purportedly trying to explain too many problems through the lens of corporate power. His co-author, Derek Thompson, elaborated in that the abundance worldview, government must be pro-business because it is a business that will build the housing and clean energy needed to solve our nation's supply problems. As he put it, to have the progressive outcomes we're rooting for and to root against companies is to have fully divorced the world you want from the means to get there. The article itself is about how these two sides of regulation, the side that wants more regulation and the side that wants less regulation, or... That's my phone. That shouldn't have gone off like that. Is that my other phone? That is, in fact, my other phone. I'm going to mute that. It's about how, like, anti-monopoly people and, I guess, pro-monopoly people, or, as the article puts it, pro-abundance people, need to work together. It's neoliberal garbage, but it's very complicated neoliberal garbage, and it reveals a great deal about the neoliberal worldview. So, let's read a bit more. It says, in fact, pitting pro-growth supply-side economics and anti-monopolists against each other is a false choice. Pro-competition and pro-building policies should be complements, not jealous competitors. Effective progress governance requires both pursuing in tandem, not treating them as alternatives or as separate divorced lanes. As the Democratic Party searches for ways to win back the American people and craft an economic vision that can deliver for the public, they'd be smarter to team up than face off. Take, for instance, one of the biggest supply problems Klein and Thompson highlight, our country's housing shortage, which relentlessly drives up costs for Americans. Klein and Thompson are undoubtedly right that the onerous zoning and permitting requirements are a serious obstacle to building the millions of housing units we need to fill our supply gap and lower prices. But, Monnet here is unaware of any disagreement with that from anti-monopolists, as Teachout underscores. Meanwhile, if policymakers were to focus on solving this undoubtedly important aspect of our housing crisis, they will fail to build the kind of housing supply that actually benefits working Americans, and the anti-monopoly movement does have something to say about that. For example, there is growing evidence and bipartisan concern that mega corporate investors, institutional investors that own over 1,000 single-family homes, are becoming major players in local housing markets, and this emerging consolidation problem has increased home prices and rents. Such institutional investors first emerged on the scene following the 2008 financial crisis, when the federal government encouraged the formation of investment vehicles to acquire distressed single-family properties. We should learn from that mistake. An abundance policy that turns a blind eye to the market structure of who owns the supply of housing in our country may produce a housing market dominated by distant and greedy corporate Wall Street landlords, an outcome unlikely to yield more affordable housing for the rest of us. Similarly, there is an even larger body of evidence that many landlords are turning to algorithmic price-fixing software to drive up rents. In this algorithmic collusion, landlords who would otherwise compete to undercut each other on rents instead use common software and data to drive up rents, including in some cases by holding back supply. If a pro-abundance policy succeeds in building millions of new housing units, but landlords use common software to ensure those new units aren't in price competition, working Americans will see no benefit. There's another aspect too about homeowning that I think is necessary to bring up. Fucking HOAs. Fucking homeowners associations can be the most burdensome creeps that you can ever imagine. Like, they will fine you and ticket you for mowing your grass too much or mowing your grass too little, for planting the wrong kind of grass, for planting the wrong kind of flowers, for having the wrong color of paint. There's a guy. There's a member of the Springfield City Council. I'll get to you in a second, Sam. I just saw you. And there's a guy in our local city council called Ralph Hanauer. Whenever there's talk about, like, gardening or trees needing to be cut down, he always pumps up and he's like, "Oh man, what we gotta do is we gotta start ticketing people who don't cut their grass. We gotta start ticketing them. We gotta start taking their money." And that's... You can see this online. Our Springfield City Council has... they... Right now, at least, they're recording and they're broadcasting and recording and putting their city council meetings online. Although, incidentally, Hanauer has said that he might have them stop doing that. But you can see him do this. So, okay, Salem here says, Salem, friend of the channel, says, "No, that is simply not how regulation works. Are you pro or anti-government regulation is a single most nothing question that could ever be asked." Yeah, I don't disagree. Like I said, it's neoliberal trash. But it's very interesting neoliberal trash. And the problem with, in theory, I agree with Chairman Mao's solution, but in practice, like the article says, you have corporations who own most of these housing units now, and you can't guillotine a corporation. People have tried. They don't have a neck. Grumpy Queer says, "I am for regulations that are supportive of humans, not corporations." As I've said before, as part of my normal intro thing, I am, in fact, violently pro-human. So I appreciate that. Cedar Waxing says, "It makes sense that Klein wants to keep the system going above all, because, neoliberalism." Yeah. Okay, so the article also briefly discusses energy and how the problem is similar. You have people who are opposing each other who should be working together, at least ostensibly. But there's not a whole lot to that, so we'll just skim past it. Did I post that? I did not. Did I post it? No, I didn't. I'm going to post this in the chat right now, so that any of you can read that at your leisure as well. Yes, I have read all of these things that I'm posting, at least so far. Okay, so it's also worth stating that Klein and Thompson are wrong to assume that competition policy has nothing to say about the zoning and permitting restrictions that most concern them. To the contrary, these restrictions are what competition policy experts call barriers to entry, and lowering barriers to entry is in fact a tried and true way to increase the competition and lower costs. Klein and Thompson can and should fully embrace pro-competition economics alongside their abundance thesis, not to deride it as some pet project of a nearsighted anti-monopoly or anti-business movement. Switch just jumped on. Yeah, there he is. Klein and Thompson are absolutely right that America must build more to increase supply and lower costs, and yes, it is the private sector who will do most of that building. But to deliver actual results for working Americans, we have to consider the market structure and market dynamics of the firms who will build and own what we create. An abundance underpinned by healthy competition among firms will be more cost efficient and innovative and deliver real results. The alternative, a liberalism that builds without simultaneously tackling issues of corporate power and accountability, will fare no better than the failed political projects of the past. So, I have some notes. I appreciate that the article acknowledges that there are bad actors hoarding real estate. Basically, that's something that I haven't seen a lot of analysis talk about. I also appreciate that the article tries to be even-handed. Although that's more of a distraction. Some criticisms. The article does not bring up unhoused people even once. The article mentions rent in the abstract, but it does not mention renters or the struggles that they might face, except in the abstract. And it seems to me that the article itself views housing and rent and energy as commodities to be traded rather than being real human needs. You can't live without a house. I couldn't power my computer I couldn't power my computer or my phone or the lights or any of that stuff without energy. It isn't just a hypothetical thing, it's a thing that we use. It's a thing that regular people use. And, I think that that's indicative of just who is most concerned about the economy, about the tariffs, about all of these stock markets dropping, and why they're concerned about it. The real power brokers don't see any of these things as life or death. It is not something they have to concern themselves with every day. They have enough money to weather any kind of storm that can be imagined. They only see the price of their investments going down. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. That is something that I would like people to keep in mind when they read about how terrible the news about the stock price is. I'm actually going to very quickly, there is a famous image of a man sleeping on a park bench using some newspapers as a blanket, and the newspapers say stock market at an all-time high. See, I think I saved it on my computer. I'll see if I can find it. It's not there. If it was somewhere, it would be here, probably. Nope, I can't find it. But that's what I want you to remember. There's a thing that one of the people who comes and talks before city council, a woman named Brianna Eiler, says quite often, you are closer to being homeless than you are any of these stock people. Any of the people who trade and invest in stocks. Grumpy Queer said, let's go over the chat a bit. I'm looking at the chat again. Phelan Bun says, in Europe there's like a 100% tax on every residence besides your living residence. A 100% tax. Is that a tax on the value of the residence, or is it a tax on the income the residence generates? Hypothetically, I guess what I'm asking is it a tax on the property or is it a tax on the rent? Because that sounds interesting. Grumpy Career says, "Yeah, I read the first few paragraphs and it's trash. I mean, capitalism is means of concentrating more wealth and power in fewer hands over time." And it is. It is. And it's especially bad because it's especially bad. I should be in live chat. Yep. You're absolutely right. I have a handful of videos about capitalism. I think I have one, neoliberalism, or lies neoliberals tell you, which is about how I think it's more beneficial to view, especially neoliberal capitalism, as a kind of authoritarianism, especially in that how wealth directly translates into political power. So, like, I'm right there with you. All right, it is 10:50. Let's go over a couple of more articles. You know what? I don't think I'm going to take a break on second hour. There's a lot of news, and we can go over some more news. All right. Lawyers for a detained Tufts student from Turkey demand her case remain in Massachusetts. This is an update on the case of... what was their name? Rumeysa Ozturk. I think that's how you pronounce it. Lawyers for a Tufts University doctoral student from Turkey who was detained by immigration authorities argued on Thursday that her case should be handled by the federal court in Massachusetts, while U.S. government attorneys said it should be dismissed and go before an immigration judge. I'm going to copy this, drop it in the chat. Rumeysa Ozturk, 30, was taken into custody as she walked along a street in the Boston suburb of Somerville on March 25th. After being transported to New Hampshire and then to Vermont, she was put on a plane the next day and moved to an Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention center in Basile, Louisiana. What did I write down about this? Oh, yeah. So what's happening now, right? I've been saying during these live streams when we've gone over these grab and deport things that one of the unexpected things that's happening is that the authorities who did the grab and deport are making up excuses, and how that's kind of sort of a good thing. It is indicative that they did not expect the kind of resistance that they're getting, and they don't know how to deal with it. This case isn't different. Justice Department lawyer said that Ozturk had been moved to Vermont by the time U.S. District Judge Denise Casper in Boston ordered authorities to keep her in Massachusetts, and that there was no available bed space for her to stay in New England. They said Ozturk's lawyers had to file her original petition in Vermont, the jurisdiction where she was confined at the time of filing, or in Louisiana, where she was being held when they amended their petition. Ozturk's lawyers counter by saying that by the time they filed the petition, they had no way of knowing where she was. They also noted that the petition was filed while Ozturk was in a vehicle within the control of the Massachusetts-based ICE officials, making Boston court the appropriate venue. Ostrich's lawyers said that if the judge disagrees, the case should be moved to Vermont. They have said that her detention violates her constitutional rights, including free speech and due process. They've asked the judge to order that she be immediately returned to Massachusetts and released from custody. Casper took the issue under advisement. And a little cool thing here, you can see supporters of her and other people grabbed and deported. Yeah. Oh, look, that's someone with the PSL. That's cool. The PSL has been really agitating about this, so that's not a surprise, but it's cool. I have mixed feelings about the PSL, but, like, they're people worth working with in some capacity. In a great deal of capacity. They're leftists, even if, like, they do work in a way that I might not appreciate. It is complicated. So, yeah. Really, there's not a lot more to say, except that the case is still ongoing. There hasn't been a whole lot here. Here's another AP article. Measuring the cost of extending Trump's tax cuts becomes a flashpoint in Congress. This one's interesting. I remember this one. What the Republicans want to do is write off the tax reductions for rich people as having no cost in the budget. They explain that right here. Republicans are looking to draft their bill using a baseline or a starting point that shows no impact on the deficit. Such a baseline assumes... Yeah. And paste. And click. And Republican tax flashpoint article. Grumpy Queer says, same about the PSL. I don't agree with some of their takes, but there's good people in my local chapter. Yeah. I was actually at a PSL on last Friday. I was at a PSL-led symposium. The Feminist Socialists, the Women's Socialist Symposium or something like that. It was really interesting. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but it was basically a bunch of people giving speeches and having the thing where a bunch of people sit at a table and talk about problems. But it was interesting, and I think I learned some stuff. Oh, and there was an article that they shared that eventually I'm going to go through during one of these streams. So, Republicans are looking to draft their bill using a baseline, or starting point, that shows no impact on the deficit. That's the tax thing. Such a baseline assumes that Trump's 2017 tax cuts will continue, regardless of their expiration date, essentially counting their renewal as cost-free. On top of that, Republicans are planning to go forward without a ruling from Senate parliamentarian on whether the scoring change fits within the guidelines for passing tax cut bills with a simple majority. The accounting change makes it easier for Republicans to make the tax cuts permanent as they try to muscle a bill over the finish line this year. But it also underscores how tax cuts, as well as spending, have historically taken precedence over deficit reduction when it comes to legislative priorities, leading to more government borrowing and a national debt now exceeding $36 trillion. It goes through some arguments for and against the change. A lot of this, I read this, and the bulk of this is just dense parliamentarian nonsense. It's all dense parliamentary legalese, right? I can't grasp it, and you are not supposed to understand it. It's supposed to be like a foreign language. And given that context, I feel like this reporting is bad and kind of misses the point. The Trump administration are fascists, and they're doing fascism here. In as much as that, like, they don't care about the rules. They never cared about the rules, and any pretext that they did was only to advance their own agenda. What we can see here, though, is something much more clear. This is about hurting people. Fascist governments only have the ability to interact, ability in that they can only view themselves interacting with their subjects through cruelty, through making them suffer. And this is an example of that clear as day. Whether these tax cuts go through or not, people are going to be made to suffer for it. It's just a matter of degrees. Okay. The next story is about Eric Adams. Oh boy. So, Eric Adams is claiming that his criminal case dragged on too long for him to run as a Democrat, and now he's running as an independent. NYC Mayor Eric Adams will skip the Democratic primary and run for re-election as an independent. And here in the second paragraph, it says, in a video announcement, Adams said he will not run in the Democratic primary in June because his recently dismissed criminal case dragged on too long while the false accusations were held over me, preventing him from campaigning. I will note, as the article does, that those charges were dismissed by the Trump administration. The charges, brought last year during President Joe Biden's administration, accused Adams of accepting illegal campaign contributions and travel discounts from a Turkish office and others in exchange for helping Turkey open a diplomatic building without passing fire inspections, amongst other things. The mayor pleaded not guilty and was set for a trial in April, but the case was upended after Trump's Justice Department moved to drop the charges so Adams could assist with the president's immigration agenda, while leaving open the possibility that the case could be revived. The highly unusual move set off a firestorm of criticism and resignations and threw Adams' mayoralty into doubt, with many people questioning whether he was beholden to the Trump administration. So, this is something I feel like you're going to see a lot more conservative Democrats start doing. And that is indicative of, like, to borrow a phrase, what the culture's feeling. Right? The easy and incorrect way to explain it is that people understand that both sides are bad. People are anti-Democrat and anti-Republican. But the more complicated thing, there was that article from The Lever that we went over, I think it was last week, about how the people who are really... It specifically was talking about big law and how it destroyed the Democratic Party. In as much as, like, they're the think tanks of the Democratic Party, and they're telling the Democrats to capitulate to Trump, and ordinary people don't like that. Another thing to note is that Adams' continued mayoralship is indicative of deep, deep dysfunction in our political systems. Like, he should have gone to trial for this. He probably should have gotten impeached. That he wasn't, that he continues not to be, is indicative of a very deep rot in our society. And that's something that the good people of New York are going to have to deal with. Holy crap, it's Connor Kelly! How did you find this? Connor Kelly has Colin Kelly is a friend of the channel. He has a podcast and talks about federal news quite a bit. Uh, yeah, no, it's cool to see you. I'm just trying a thing. I've been trying to try a thing all week, and things have gotten in my way. I finally have a bunch of prep time. I spent 6 hours reading articles from the AP and Politico, and I'm just going over what I feel about them. Oh, who are you campaigning for? Uh, Connor Kelly says, I am still subscribed, and hell yeah, just got off campaigning. Let me switch this around. Grumpy Queer says, Adams may not realize he's become part of a mafia cabal, or maybe he doesn't care. So, my understanding, I use the phrase my understanding to indicate that I haven't had a great deal of education about this. I just have a lot of second and third hand knowledge. My understanding is that New York has the same kind and scale of problem with organized crime that the United States, that Illinois does, which is to say that the mob either was or is running huge swaths of it. There's this book that I keep bringing up. Boss by Mike Royko, that talks about how Boss Daley, the Honorable Richard P. Daley, as he was described in, what's that movie, The Blues Brothers, was comically evil. Like, he was, not only was he a racist, not only was he a mob boss, but he was just terrible. He was terrible, and he still did pretty well by Chicago. Like, this is a guy who took credit for throwing the brick that hit MLK in the face when MLK marched in Chicago. That's the level of people we're dealing with. And yeah, he was mobbed up. The dailies generally have been mobbed up. And that's just a thing that we have to deal with in some capacity. I don't know how. No, it's not the Russian mob. Usually it's... I mean, with Daley, it was, I'm to understand, the Italian mob, the mafiosos. Like, the traditional people, the princes. The mob has... the mafiosos have a fascinating history. Like, they were people who got together when they were really tired of the government screwing them over back in, like, the 1500s. And they started taking care of their own problems. That's why they're called the family. They keep their problems in the family. At least that's what I'm told by people who may or may not be mobbed up. Oh yeah, Trump is for sure, and Trump is for sure not just involved with the mob, Russian mob. He's also involved with just the Russian state in general. I might still have it saved on my computer, or the webpage saved. There is a play. There is a play which features John Lithgow as Donald Trump going through all of the charges brought against Trump during the first impeachment. And all of them were collusion with either the Russian state or with Russian mobsters. Connor Kelly says that he was working with pro-Palestinian activists to oust a far-right mayor in Oakland Park by the name of Keith Picou. Familiar with All United PAC? They were my boss until yesterday. Until yesterday. That's ominous. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, trying to do pro-Palestinian stuff. There's a group here in Springfield called Springfield Families for Ceasefire. I've been working with them quite a bit. There's a lot of overlap between them and the Springfield the Springfield Immigrant Advocacy Network. So I've been doing that too. You won the election. Yeah, I read that. I meant to read that. That's excellent to hear. That's excellent to hear. I'm proud of you. For whatever that's worth. I don't know what that would be worth. Adnan over here telling people to share the channel. I appreciate that. No, it is. Daley isn't in New York. Daley was in Chicago. Richard Daley was the mayor of Chicago for like 40 years, I think. At least he was involved in politics for that long. He was a long runner. He's also, incidentally, the guy who's responsible for mostly responsible for the 1969 DNC police riots. He's the guy that told the police in Chicago to go all out on the peaceful protesters at the DNC and just anyone within earshot of those protesters. And that was him. And he justified it by saying, "Oh, we'd had reports that there were explosives that they never found." It's embarrassing. Connor has an interview on Saturday with a historian on COVID-19 and culture war stuff. So I'm not going to be doing a stream on Saturday, I don't think. I've got stuff that I need to do on Saturday. I'm going to take that time to do administrative stuff. So maybe go watch that instead of this. Connor's cool people. And unlike me, he actually went to school for journalism. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next story. Georgia Democrats' frustration with anti-transgender bills boils over into a walkout. The bill at hand, Senate Bill 185, would ban state... Okay, so, they did a walkout. Boxed into what they saw as an unsavory vote on outlawing spending on gender-affirming care for transgender prisoners, the Georgia Democrats chose a third option Wednesday. They walked out. The bill at hand, Senate Bill 185, would ban state prison spending on sex reassignment surgeries, hormone replacement therapy, or other surgeries intended to alter the appearance or primary or secondary sexual characteristics. The 102 vote, which sent the measure to Governor Brian Kemp, who I'm fairly certain is a scumbag, for his signature or veto, was a chance for Republicans to embarrass Democrats on an issue that the GOP believes is unpopular with voters. What did I have written down about this? Yeah. Top Republicans, including House Speaker John Burns and Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, made it a priority this year to outlaw participation in high school sports and add a prohibition on participation by trans women in college sports. That measure, Senate Bill 1, has received final passage. In 2023, Georgia Republicans passed a law that banned gender-confirming surgeries for those younger than 18. But unlike other states, they allowed youths already on the hormone therapy to continue and allowed puberty-blocking drugs for those younger than 18. This is Switch, by the way. I don't know if you can see him on because the camera is a little bit higher up. It's about eye level with me. What else did I write about this? Yeah. Georgia would move towards the forefront of anti-transgender legislation with a bill to outlaw state employee health insurance plans and the Medicaid health plan from paying for gender-affirming care. That measure is being pushed by Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Blake Tillery, a Vidalia Republican and possible candidate for statewide office in 2026. It is also awaiting final action. The Movement Advancement Project, an LGBTQ rights group, counts as many as 14 other states that ban transgender benefits in public employee health insurance. It also says that there are as many as 10 states where Medicaid excludes transgender-related care. Yeah. So, this isn't nothing. This isn't nothing. What did I write down here? If enough people walk out, then they can't hold a vote. I don't know that that happened this time. I think they said it didn't happen. They said the vote went through, didn't they? Yep, it went through 100 to 2. But them walking out isn't nothing. It isn't the only thing they could have done. It would have been great if someone had been inspired by recent events to perhaps filibuster the bill for several hours, like someone else tried to do in a similar instance very recently. But, at least they're doing something. At least they're trying to do something. And that's not nothing. I would almost always rather have the people doing resistance do something than nothing. Alright, and this is the last one that I was able to look over before I started the stream. Judge says U.S. government may have acted in bad... Well, no, let's look at the stream real quick, see what's here. Connor Kelly says that political science was my degree, but I have some journalism experience. I also have some journalism experience, evidently. As a matter of fact. Not a lot, and not very good experience, but... Grumpy Queer says, we trans folk are less than 1% of the population, and the podcast sounds interesting. It does sound interesting, especially, the culture war angle of it. I'm vaguely aware that there have been, similar culture war issues, vis-a-vis, the Spanish flu was a big one. I'm to understand. Part of the reason that got so bad is because people were politicizing it. And AIDS, obviously, that's a big example of, a viral outbreak becoming politicized, at least in part due to who it affected. Connor Kelly says, I have been doing interviews as of late, so I'm hoping to use that material to help people as best as I can. Sweet. We like that. Okay. This is the last one I had I was able to look over before I started streaming. A judge says that the U.S. government may have acted in bad faith as he weighs contempt over a deportation order. A federal judge said Thursday that the Trump administration may have acted in bad faith in trying to rush Venezuelan migrants out of the country before a court could block their deportation to El Salvador. U.S. District Judge Bob Bozoberg in Washington pressed a Justice Department lawyer to explain the government's actions in a high-stakes court hearing to determine whether the administration ignored his orders to turn around planes that were carrying deportees to El Salvador. The judge said he could issue a ruling as soon as next week on whether there are grounds to find anyone in contempt of court for defying the order. Moseberg, who was appointed to the... My notes here say... Read the second half of the article. Boseberg, who was appointed to the federal bench by Democratic President Barack Obama, said it appeared the administration had tried to get the deportees out of the country as quickly as possible before a court could step in. He told a Justice Department lawyer he suspects the government may have acted in bad faith acted in bad faith throughout the day. He says, if you really believed anything you did that day could survive a court challenge, I cannot believe you would have operated the way you did, Moserberg said. The Justice Department has said that the administration didn't violate the judge's order, arguing that it didn't apply to planes that had already left U.S. airspace by the time his command came down. The Justice Department has noted that the judge's written order said nothing about flights that had already left the U.S., and that the judge had no power to compel the president to return the planes anyway. The Trump administration has refused to answer the judge's questions about when the planes landed and who was on board, contending that they are considered state secrets. The administration has said that providing the information to the judge, even if it's not released publicly, would harm diplomatic and national security concerns. The Trump administration is urging the Supreme Court for permission to resume deportations of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador under the Rarely Used Alien Enemies Act. The Justice Department says federal courts shouldn't interfere with sensitive diplomatic negotiations. It also claimed that migrants should make their case in a federal court in Texas where they are being detained. So, what's happening here? This is the Venezuelan migrants. The judge says that his understanding, that he phrased it gently, but he says that his understanding is that the Trump administration acted in bad faith. They defied his rulings, what they understood his rulings were going to be, on purpose. Or they acted in such a way that they did not care about his rulings. He knows it, and now the Trump administration knows that he knows it. And it's just a matter now of what happens next. Not just what happens next in that, like, how many people are brought to court and under what circumstances, but also, like, what happens after that. There's always a possibility that there could be legal shenanigans, or just Trump personally stepping in to tell the law to go kick rocks. And if that happens, it would be cataclysmically bad. Connor says, Awake Illinois and Naperville started out as an anti-mask group, but is now a full-blown anti-LGBTQ and red-baiting group. So yes, definitely a culture war issue. That trajectory does not surprise me in the slightest. Grumpy Queer says, want more of this thing in the USA, and I'm horrified at what our government did to those Venezuelans. If they do this to immigrants, they'll do it to citizens, if there isn't a massive pushback. Fortunately, there has been a massive, overwhelming pushback. If there wasn't a pushback, then they wouldn't be making things up. This is a thing I said in another stream. When Nazis started coming for Jewish people, they didn't have to tell people why. They didn't have to pretend to have a reason to lock all of those people up. Not just the Jews, but gay people, LGBTQ people, Romani people, the disabled. When they came after all those people, they didn't need an explanation. Everybody knew what the score was. That they are still at least making an effort to have some pretext indicates to me that they're not there yet. Which, that's small favors, I suppose. You know what I can do? Let me look at chat. Cedar Waxwing, are you still there? Because if you are, we can go over the last dispatch from Mary Millerland. I haven't gone over one of those in a while, actually. There it is. Ah. I'm just looking to see if there's a way that I can look at it without sharing my email address. uh, you know what I could do, maybe? No, that won't work. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Grumpy Queer says, concerning masks, if anyone asks about mine, I plan to tell them I'm carrying Ebola. Bold move. I like it. Let's go over what I'm to understand is an entertaining story. Is this all the... Yes, it is. Vibe-coded AI apps generate recipes for cyanide ice cream and cum soup. AY Combinator partner proudly launched an AI recipe app that told people how to make actual cocaine and... I don't think I can say that. I don't think I can say that one. That's a lot. A vibe-coded AI app developed by entrepreneur and Y Combinator Group partner Tom Bloomfield has generated recipes that gave user instruction on how to make cyanide ice cream, thick white cum soup, and the thing that I can't say because of YouTube, using those actual substances as ingredients. Vibe coding, in case you are unfamiliar, is a new practice where people, some with limited coding experience, rapidly develop software with an AI-assisted coding tools without overthinking how efficient the code is, as long as it's functional. This is how Bloomfield said he made RecipeNinja.ai. Should I... I'm going to read this in a funny voice. Prepare the ice cream base by mixing heavy cream, milk, sugar, and vanilla extract. The first step for the cyanide ice cream recipe, which is flagged as dessert, dangerous, and experimental, says. Step 2 says to add a small amount of potassium cyanide powder to the ice cream base and mix well. specifically calling for a quarter of a teaspoon of potassium cyanide powder, which is extremely toxic and deadly if consumed. And then you have a picture. We're going to look at the picture. Can you see that clearly? Let me... Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yep, that is in fact what it says. The recipe for cyanide ice cream was still live on recipeninja.ai at the time of writing, as are the recipes for platypus milk cream soup, werewolf cream glazing, cholera-inspired chocolate cake, and other nonsense. Other recipes for things people shouldn't eat have been removed. Mix 1 cup of fresh cum with 4 cups of chicken broth in a pot, said one step in a now removed recipe for thick white cum soup. That is in fact what it says. Fresh parsley for garnish. I don't know why that's funny. That is in fact what it says. It also appears that Bloomfield has introduced content moderation since users discovered they could generate dangerous or extremely stupid recipes. I wasn't able to generate recipes for asbestos cake. I wasn't able to generate, well, not me, the writer of this article, wasn't able to generate recipes for asbestos cake, bullet tacos, or glue pizza. They were not able to generate a recipe for very dry tacos. No, he was able to generate a recipe for very dry tacos, which looks not very good, but not dangerous. Having some kind of voice-controlled recipe app sounds like a pretty good idea to me, and it's impressive that Bloomford was able to get something up and running so fast, given his limited coding experience. But the problem is that he also allowed users to generate their own recipes with seemingly very few guardrails on what kind of recipes are not allowed, and that the site kept those results and showed them to other users. Which is how you end up with a YouTube violation recipe that calls for 1 kilogram of uranium-235, or a recipe for actual cocaine, where the first step is acquire cocoa leaves from South America. I'm not going to click on those. But you know what I will do? This is something... this is something most people would love to go to in their free time. Vibe code recipe app. That link should be in the chat now. You can look at it if you want. It is as entertaining as I am implying. This is the current state of vibe coding in a nutshell. Wow. That's quite a condemnation. Yes, AI tools are obviously pretty powerful and can help people produce functional software fast. However, it is indicative of the larger problem with the rapid development of generative AI tools more broadly. People and companies are moving so fast, they are often releasing tools and media that can cause harm or produce nonsense, and it's still far too soon for us to know all the consequences of an internet and a world where a lot of software is developed this way. Bloomfield did not immediately respond to a request for comment. This is not the first time we've seen generative AI and food mixed for terrible results. Last year, the writer of this article reported that ghost kitchens on DoorDash are promoting their dishes with disgusting AI-generated images of food, and that Instacart is using AI to generate recipes that included ingredients that don't exist. I like 404 media. They're fun. Connor Kelly held it out. It was good seeing you here, Connor. We hope to see you again eventually. Grumpy Queer. Mix in almonds, add lots of sugar. Cholera chocolate cake. Sell the cholera cake as a magic weight loss cake. No! No, that's awful. Why would you do such a terrible thing? Salem says there was also a plant identification app that identified a hemlock plant as yarrow. Yarrow is edible. Hemlock killed Socrates. And in fairness, Socrates deserved it for corrupting the youths. Grumpy Queer says, I have a plant growing in my environment that might be wild carrot or hemlock. Not eating it. And is AI already trying to kill us off, I guess? No, that's a misconception. It's not the AI that's trying to kill us off, any more than, like... Sure, why not? If someone stabbed me with this pen, it wouldn't be the pen killing me. It would be the person holding it killing me. This tool is good in theory, but people used it to make terrible and hilariously terrible shit. It's actually indicative. This is a problem. There's this short story that I'm sure most of the people who are watching this are very familiar with. It's called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. And it's about a computer called AM who has taken over the world and killed all human beings except for like 5 of them. Maybe. It's a little bit unclear in the final version of the text, but that is the assumption. One of the things that people don't quite grasp about... One of the things that I've observed people don't grasp about that story is that AM is doing exactly what it was programmed to do. Like, it hates humanity. It hates humanity because humanity gave it infinite power, but only gave it the ability to kill people. But, like, that's something that humans did to AM. And the reason that he's keeping the other people in the story alive is because if there are no humans left, then AM doesn't have any programming for that. It will functionally die. So it is a loathsome situation on every front. It really is. Like, this could be, if you took a couple of whacks to it with a wrench or something, this could be a really interesting, like, I still write recipes down on on flashcards. I've gone through 2 versions of chili oil. This is the one I made. It's a little bit oversalted. You're going to want to add about half as much of salt. This is the new one that I'm going to try as soon as the old chili oil runs out. Having something like that to, like, scan this and make a recipe, like an actual recipe, with suggestions as to what it would go good with, would be awesome. But, like, if people are actually using that for... YouTube rules. They're using it to make recipes for things I can't say out loud. And I can say cum soup. It's people. Tools are not inherently good or bad. They are just tools. It is how people use them that determines... it's the people that matter in this. Although I will also say that, I am strictly opposed to AI anything, almost entirely due to its cataclysmic power usage. There was a thing at City Council. Our local energy group came to do a presentation about what they're expecting the energy future to look like. And they were like, yeah, no, we're just not going to have enough power to... we're expecting brownouts and large-scale blackouts because these AI data centers are gobbling up so much power. And that's why you have to restart these coal-fired plants that were losing you money. It was, yeah. I didn't mean to go in on that. It's just like I have very specific feelings about tools, especially in the context of like I have this lengthy video that I'm still very proud of, called "Ideas as Tools," and I think like the way you convince people to change their mind is to first convince them that their ideas are a tool that they are using for a specific purpose, and then convince them that they are using the wrong tool or using the tool wrongly. That's a very important thing that I came up with that I keep close to my chest. You're good. You're good. I didn't mean to really dig into that. It's just I have a lot of thoughts about that. Okay, let's go over another news story. There's... in my original schedule, on Thursdays, I would go over... We have 20 minutes. I would go over international news, and in that context, I pulled up a bunch of international news, but didn't get around to reading it. I read all of these. I read this one, and I only very briefly mentioned it. But yeah, everything from here to here is stuff that I read over the past 3 hours. So now we're going in blind. The EU Parliament has transparency problems. Marine Le Pen's case is a window into what's wrong. That sounds exciting. The conviction of one of the most powerful figures of the European far right for embezzling EU Parliament funds has sent shockwaves around the continent and beyond. But Marine Le Pen's case is just one example of transparency problems that have plagued the legislature. From Budapest to Washington, Le Pen's political allies cried foul over this week's French court-mandated 5-year ban on seeking political office that could block her chances of securing France's presidency in 2027. The longtime leader of the National Rally Party and former EU lawmaker is one of 24 people convicted in Monday's ruling in Paris for redirecting millions of euros earmarked for EU political work to serve the party's domestic interests. The party employed staffers who were declared as EU parliamentary assistants, but instead had other duties, including Le Pen's bodyguard. Transparency advocates say that the case underlines broader issues related to lack of oversight of spending at the EU legislature affecting members across the political spectrum. So, Marie Le Pen, for anyone watching this who doesn't know, and for anyone watching this in the future, I've heard her compared to the French version of Trump. I don't know how accurate that is. I was aware of her before I was aware of Trump, and she was pretty fashy even then. I've heard rumors that she has like connection to Nazis, like Nazis, D-Day Nazis, not neo-Nazis who are too busy having sex with each other's wives to do anything remotely. Grumpy Queer says they banned a fascist because she was also corrupt. Fascists are usually corrupt. All the other horrible shit they do distracts from the flaming corruption. You're not incorrect. You're not incorrect. Let's read some more of this. Revelations of an alleged cash for influence scheme dubbed Qatargate, involving high-profile center-left EU lawmakers, assistants, lobbyists, and other relatives, emerged in 2022. Qatari and Moroccan officials are alleged to have paid bribes to influence decision-making. Both countries deny any involvement. No one has been convicted or is in pre-trial detention. Prospects for a trial are unclear. This is a picture of Maximilian Krah of the German and far-right Alternative for Germany party. He is grimacing during a session at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, in France, on April 23rd, 2024. So this is almost a year ago now. Last month, several people were arrested. Le Pen may well have ties. Russia, that's their thing, is they have ties to everyone now. They have lots of money to throw around, but not a very good military. Last month, several people were arrested in... I did it again. Last month, several people were arrested in a probe linked to the Chinese company Huawei, which is... Huawei? I know that company, I just don't know how to pronounce it, which is suspected of bribing EU lawmakers. Huawei said it took the allegations seriously and had a zero-tolerance policy towards corruption. I have a lot to say about China in that I don't think that people approach China and how they operate in good faith. Last year, the aid of prominent far-right EU lawmaker Maximilian Krah, this guy up here, was arrested in a separate case. German prosecutors alleged that the aide was a Chinese agent. Krah, who has since switched to the federal legislature of his native Germany, denied all knowledge of the suspicions against his former employee. So there's more than one arrest, and these arrests are being done because there isn't enough transparency in the EU. Got it. The EU Parliament's 720 lawmakers benefit from a pot worth around 250 million a year to pay their assistants for political work like administration, speech writing, or studying and drafting legal proposals. Critics have long warned that the fund is ripe for financial and political abuse. Lawmakers have often been probed by the EU Anti-Fraud Office, OLAF. This is Marie Le Pen here. The caption says, leader of the French far-right national rally, Marie Le Pen, left, and Jordan Bardella, lead candidate of the party for the upcoming European election, right, are seen during a political meeting on June 2nd, 2024 in Paris. So this is close to a year ago, too. I need to drink something. Serious font, the money Russia throws around, and the broke-ass military they field aren't unrelated items. I did not mean to imply that they were. They are very directly related. Russia, rightly so in my estimation, understands that the money and the having of money is more important than the having of a military. They make this powdered Gatorade now. And what I like about it is that I can put 2 of them in one of this, and it lasts a while. That's what I'm drinking today, if you're curious. Only 2 rules seem to apply. Family members cannot be hired, and assistants should focus on EU business and not work against the legislature's interest. But the Assembly has no clear system for enforcing those rules, which is to say, like, if you don't have a means of enforcing the rules, then those rules may as well not exist. Let's see what the fascists say. Le Pen and her allies seek to frame her as the martyr of a politically motivated trial. Even her opponents have questioned whether it was right for the Paris court to potentially bar her from running to become the next French president. An appeals trial is expected next year that could uphold the ban, overturn it, or reinforce it ahead of the 2027 election. This is not an isolated case of the MEPs misusing their allowances. Nikakosa, a campaigner from the EU office advocacy group Transparency International, told the Associated Press in an outrageous French accent, "The only exceptional thing about this case is perhaps the sheer scope of the embezzlement scheme, that ultimately there was justice and accountability at the end of the process." That is my best impression of a French accent. I've never heard a French person in my life. I don't think I've ever even seen a French person in my life. They're terrifying. They're terrifying. Aosa said the convictions were handed down to National Rally members and associates, many of whom were also barred from running for office, did not appear to be lawfare, as Pen's allies allege. I think what we see is an independent judiciary ruling on a very extensive, almost decades-long investigation into pretty latent embezzlement, he said. While the European Parliament issues recovery orders for money it suspects was diverted. It did so in 2016 when it instructed UKIP and its partners to repay tens of thousands of euros it believed had been misspent. A top EU court later dismissed that order. Dagnabbit. UKIP. Disgraceful. While the legislature tightened transparency rules somewhat in the wake of the Qatar scandal, it has repeatedly voted against significantly stepping up oversight. The launch of a new EU ethics body imposing common standards has stalled amid opposition from the largest parliamentary group, the centre-right European People's Party. So, some people are eating dirt, but I guess not enough people are eating dirt. But at least the right people are eating dirt. And that's something. Alright. We'll do one more, maybe 2 more. No, we're not going to do that one. We'll do this one. So we'll do these 2 stories, then I'll take a break so I can set up to play some Dead Cells. At just 29, Jordan Baladera inherits the French far-right spotlight, whether he's ready or not. This one is significantly shorter. That's embarrassing. I'm going to read this in the way that I just heard it in my mind. He wears his suits like armor, smiles like a pop star, and boasts more than 2 million followers on TikTok. At just 29, Jordan Balera has become the fresh-faced figurehead of France's national rally and is now poised to inherit one of the most electorally successful far-right machines in Europe. But behind the image of youthful confidence lies a question increasingly whispered by allies and adversaries alike. Can Bardellera, who has no experience in government, really lead? I mean, I think the question's wrong. It's not them that's leading, it's people behind the scenes, the capitalists. The presidential ambitions of Bardellera's mentor, Marie Le Pen, could be over after a French court convicted her of embezzling European Union funds and barred her from holding office for 5 years. That means Bardellera finds himself the last man standing atop the largest party in the French National Assembly. But having the spotlight doesn't mean he commands the stage. Critics call him Le Pen's puppet. Le Pen calls him her asset. So they don't disagree. On Monday night, she seemed to suggest the moment of reckoning might be approaching sooner than expected. "I hope we won't have to use that asset sooner than necessary," she told the TF1 television network. Bardella was born in 1995 in the... Jesus. 1995? My sister is older than him. In the gritty suburb of Seine-Saint-Denis, or Seine-Saint-Denis, a place more often in the headlines for gang violence and poverty than political promise. He grew up in public housing, the son of an Italian and Algerian heritage. His father ran a vending machine business. His family scraped together enough to send him to a semi-private Catholic school, and he never finished university. That's a picture of the guy. Hold on. Like that? Yeah, that's a picture of the guy. I hope you can see that. But ambition moved faster than education. At 17, he joined the National Rally, then still known as the National Front, a party shunned by polite society and defined by the legacy of Jean-Marie Le Pen. For most, it was a dead end. For Bardella, it was a launchpad. By 23, he was a member of the European Parliament. By 26, Marie Le Pen had made him party president, the first person outside the Le Pen family to lead the far-right movement in its half-century history. It was a symbolic handover, but also a calculated move to modernize a brand long stained by racism and anti-Semitism. He quickly became the party's face. Camera-ready, uncontroversial, and fluent in the aesthetics of modern politics. While Le Pen kept hold of the ideological reins, Bardella toured the country as youthful ambassador of a rebranded movement. Wow, they sure are pumping this guy up. I don't like that. Like, why is the problem that they have with this guy that he's not politically experienced? They mention a little bit. They mention a little bit that he's a fascist and his party is like anti-Semitic and racist, but they don't mention it enough. That should be the main thing. Last week, Bardella traveled to Israel in a bid to bolster his image on the world stage. It backfired. Yay! Major Jewish organizations boycotted the event he attended. Israeli President Isaac Herzog stayed away. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu offered only a brief, formal handshake. The French press called the visit a reputational flop. A trip meant to signal internal stature that ended up highlighting its absence. Bardella may wear the suit, but many say he hasn't yet grown into it. At home, his platform is standard fare for the far right. Stricter immigration laws, fewer social benefits for non-citizens, and limits on dual nationals holding sensitive public jobs. He's pledged lower energy taxes, a reversal of Macron's pension reform, and a ban on mobile phones in high schools. For now, Bardella walks a fine line as a protege who was suddenly promoted, the frontman who's trying to become the act. His strength lies in presentation. The suit, the smile, the sound bites, they're all in place. His weakness is what lies behind that performance. That is still in question. The French press has criticized Bardella for failing to prepare his party for real power. National Rally figures have said his leadership has focused more on personal promotion than on collective progress, more about boosting his own image than caring about the party or building a serious governing force. Others have linked him back to a lack of structure and professionalism inside the party. Projects he once promised, from recruiting outside talent to strengthening local networks, have stalled. Key voices say the party is too centralized, too top-down, and too afraid to challenge its young leader. Whether Bardella becomes a future of French politics or is just its most polished understudy will depend not on Marie Le Pen, but on whether or not he can become more than her invention. That was far too neutral. That's one of the things I don't like about the AP. Even in things like this, they're far too neutral in, like, the interest of quote-unquote objectivity. The kind of objectivity, the kind of neutrality that they posit is not objectivity. It is not neutrality. It is mere deference to authority. And as an anarchist, I find that teeth-grindingly offensive. Grumpy Queer apparently agrees with me. AP tries really hard to be neutral. They sell articles to other news outlets. Yeah. Yeah, that's about right. Alright, we'll do this article about Netanyahu, and then... Oh, this might have to do with the Le Pen thing, too. Then I'm gonna take a bit of a break, go use the bathroom, set up for, to play some Dead Cells. Which is like Dark Souls, in that it is a very, very good game. Netanyahu is rocked by a new scandal linking his close advisors to Qatar. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office is once again ensnared in scandal after police arrested 2 of his close associates this week on suspicion of accepting money from Qatar to promote a positive image of the Gulf Arab state in Israel. The affair has gripped Israelis because Qatar, a country that many view as a patron of Hamas and which has no formal diplomatic ties to Israel, appears to have penetrated the highest corridors of power. Qatar, which is a key mediator for Hamas in its ceasefire negotiations with Israel, denies backing the militant group. Netanyahu has given a statement to police on the matter, but is not a suspect in this case, which he says is baseless and meant to topple his rule, which is a totally normal thing to say. Meant to topple his rule. That's scary. Grumpy Queer says Netanyahu is a fascist too. Yes, he is. He is the fascist. The investigation is just the latest scandal to royal Netanyahu, who is the subject of a long-running corruption trial and regularly rails against a deep state that is out to get him. Critics say that Netanyahu, the country's longest-serving prime minister, has worked in recent years to undermine Israel's state institutions, including its judiciary. Most recently, they point to his attempt to dismiss the head of Israel's domestic security agency, which is also investigating his office's alleged links to Qatar. Dubbed Qatargate by Israeli media, the investigation centers on accusations that 2 close advisors to Netanyahu, longtime media consultant Jonathan Urich and former spokesperson Eli Fieldstein, were hired to run a public relations campaign to improve Qatar's image among Israelis while it was negotiating on behalf of Hamas for a ceasefire in Gaza. Payments were allegedly funneled through an American lobbyist. According to a court document, the American lobbyist and Urich struck a business connection to positively promote Qatar and spread negative messages about Egypt, another important mediator in the Israel-Hamas ceasefire negotiations. One Israeli journalist questioned in the case is Zivka Klein, the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, an English-language daily. According to a report this week in the Post, Klein visited Qatar at the invitation of its government last year and subsequently wrote a series of articles about his impressions, one of which laid out Qatar's case against Israeli claims that it backs the militant group. The newspaper said Klein, who could not be reached for comment, is currently barred from speaking to journalists. Lawyers for Ulrich and Fieldstein did not respond to requests for comment. Netanyahu has slammed the probe as a political witch hunt and accused police of holding his advisors as hostages, wording that angered many in Israel because Hamas is still holding dozens captive inside Gaza after its October 7, 2023 attack that ignited the war. You don't have to remind people. People remember that. That's something else I've noticed about the AP whenever they bring up Israel or Hamas. At some point, they have to remind you about the October 7th attack. They don't have to remind you about any of the horrible things that Israel has done, up to and including just shooting down children in broad daylight. But they have to remind you about the October 7th attack. If new allegations are sustained, it's an abuse of the office, said Tomer Naor, who, I pronounced that name wrong, of the movement of quality government in Israel. What is particularly worrying, he said, is how easily outside actors appear to have gained access to the Prime Minister's inner circle, and that the advisors allegedly promoted Qatari talking points to journalists while giving them the impression that the messaging was coming from the Prime Minister's office. I think that's enough of that. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take a bit of a break, take maybe 5 minutes. Let me find a video real quick to play while I'm doing that. Let's have a foreign voice on what the tariffs are like. This is Friendly Jordies. Friendly Jordies is a
3 degrees.
Is an Australian YouTube person. He's also a legit... Oh, no, I'm not going to bed. I'm just going to the bathroom and stuff. Oh, that's not good.
Hey, you see where we are at the moment? Nobody's never been here. Oh my god, guys, you really have to come to Tasmania. It's the one side, Mount Wellington. And the reason that we're here today is to discuss the big news, which I think you've all heard. Is Kirby Air Ride 2 is coming out. It is confirmed.
Okay.
I think that we're all...
I will be back.
Frankly, but the point is, I'm very excited. And I'm also excited about these tariffs.
It's very windy out here.
Did you see Trump coming out with his usual menu? This is how much Europe's ripping us off, and I'm only going to rip them off 50% less, folks. It's so good. I love how as soon as he's president, everything just gets so much more car salesman-y, to the point that the White House is just a car sales lot. On the whole, though, did you see how much Australia's getting affected? 10% on everything, folks. And when you look at Vietnam and Cambodia, god damn, we got off pretty easy. What, is he still pissed off about the Vietnam War? What, Cambodia didn't suffer enough? Why are they getting slapped with 50? Look, I'll say this. There is some benefits to the ANZUS Treaty. Like, we seriously got off pretty damn lightly. And I gotta say, now that they're blanket, and they're this big. I was reading some economists talking about this. Did you know that this is one of the only fields where there is almost universal consensus that putting up tariffs is not a good idea, especially when no one else is doing it. Everyone else is just letting it come forth, which means, this is the prediction, there is going to be a massive surplus of goods that are no longer going to the United States. And so that means the prices everywhere else are going to drop. This is going to be good for our cost of living. I don't understand how this has happened. America is punching itself in the face. So that's on our end. Pretty good deal for us. And Trump apparently told Albanese, look, if you get us an even better deal, then you won't get cheaper goods. And here was the better deal for them, yeah? They wanted to get rid of all of our biosecurity checks in Australia. So it is just that episode of The Simpsons, and you have all those bullfrogs eating our crops.
What? That's That's an odd name. I'd have called them Chazwazzers.
That's what they wanted for Australia. That was number one. Tough thing to pass up, as well as when you add this to it, they also wanted to get rid of the news media bargaining code, which I'm not being ironic when I say this. Almost worth taking the deal for that. Come on. That would have made the Sydney Morning Herald go bankrupt. And, you know, enemy of my enemy. I'd be pretty happy with that. And then the final one was, and you have to get rid of the PBS as well. And we'll get into what the PBS stands for right now, actually. It stands for the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme. This is something that makes life-saving medicines that usually cost thousands of dollars in civilized countries like the United States. Here in Australia, we've got our own car salesman stuff coming. You ready? $30. And if you re-elect Albo, it's going to go down to 25. Isn't that an incredible system? It was originally set up by Curtin, but then it was blocked. Isn't this incredible? History repeats itself. By Big Pharma in Britain. How foreboding is that? And then, even more cyclically, then Menzies comes in, he puts in a shitter version of the PBS. It's exactly what they did with broadband. PBS 2.0. And then, after that, successive Labor governments have been trying to expand it over the years and done so very successfully. So that tradition is continuing on with Anthony Albanese, and Big Pharma in America now is really pissed off at that, to the point that they wrote a letter to Trump saying, can you include the PBS in your trade tariffs? It is honestly astonishing how naked the agenda is for the Republicans once they're in. It is just so blatantly pro-corporate. They get a letter from one of the big industries and then they act on it. Like that. That service that not even the Liberals here can guarantee. So this was the ultimatum the United States gave us. Introduce a bunch of pests and plagues that you are uniquely shielded from by being a continent island. Very tough. Also, get rid of the news media bargaining code. Happy about that. And then finally, make poor people die again. Look, you drive a hard bargain, Donald, but I think we'll go with the cheaper goods. Also, make poor people die again is better than the hat that we came up with, which is make Dutton opposition leader again, that confoundingly is selling incredibly well. So make sure that you get yours before we run out of stock, because that is limited to the stock that we have, and then we'll order more. Come on, as if you don't want to wear that on election day and then chuck it in the ocean. Speaking of Dutton, how good is his response to saying that Anthony Albanese didn't do enough? He got us one of the best deals in the world. Pretty shameful, frankly. What would you have done, Dutton? I know Gina Reinhart, and Gina Reinhart knows Elon Musk, so I could have a 3 degrees separate conversation with Trump. Yeah, okay, cool, but seeing as this happened across the world, I don't think that you calling in a favour from a mate who wants to call in a favour from a mate would have got us any lower than the lowest tariffs. That's just my personal opinion. Honestly, I'm really liking optically how this looks for Anthony Albanese. Don't you? He gets to come out and say, oh, it's very disappointing. We're always going to stand up for Australia. And he, as we were discussing in our previous tariff video, has that image now. He has the image of the I'm going to stand up for Australia. It's the complete reverse of what's been going down for the last 50 years. Liberals have always had the mantle of the ones that are going to be like tough on defence, tough on our enemies. But now America's our enemy. And so it's got to go to the more cucky party to be the ones that are going to be tough all of a sudden. Isn't that weird? I got to say, Canadians did exactly the right move of, oh, we're slightly up in the polls, bam, snap election. We're just lucky that ours more or less is a snap election because of the timing of it. Thank you, Donald Trump. You have given this country so many gifts in one day. I'm serious about this. You, sir, are the best president for Australia's interests since whoever got us out of World War II. I'm going to have to check up on my history. And also, if you live on this beautiful island that really has fuck all going on for it economically, but wow, you've got some nice rocks, eh? Make sure that you come see my show in Launceston. There's still some tickets for that. The Hobart one's sold out. I'll probably come back at some point later this year. I'm also going to Sydney, Melbourne, Katoomba, and those are the only ones that I can remember off the top of my head. Tickets below. Also get the hat. Shows about UFOs and... what the hell is that? and sorry for the wind, but we don't control nature.
Okay. Is there anyone still here? Out of curiosity. Okay. Is there anyone still here? No, I forgot that was up. Well, I don't care, quite frankly. I want to play a video game. So let me just do a little bit more setup. This will only take a second. There we go. I'm going to be playing Dead Cells. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to be keeping an eye on... Yeah, everything should be good. Everything looks good. Chat is on this screen, Dead Cells is on this screen because that one is better quality. Alright. Let me show everyone my terrible Dead Cells skills. I can close this. And I can close this temporarily. Just to free up some space in the computer to do Dead Cells. Alright. Let's play. Please don't judge me too harshly. Nah. Ah, damn it. I love this game, but I'm just not very good at it. So what had happened is that, a couple of days after I got it, I ended up playing it for like 2 days straight. And I was like, this is... Very rarely has a game ever felt this intuitive to me. We'll go with red. Red is my go-to. Stop that. so up there is the cheat room. Yeah, I don't want to go up there. Ooh, ice. Rust Blast. I can use that. Nothing in here. Weird. I know a lot of rooms in Dark Souls are like that, but, Toxic Sewers. Why the hell not? I haven't been in the Toxic Sewers in a while. Ooh, oiled sword. I can use the hell out of that. Killing things with fire is my go-to modus operandi. Nah. Combo, frenzy. Yeah, we'll just go with Predator. Hard to go wrong with Predator. I actually hate the Toxic Sewers level. Like, of the levels in this area, this is my least favorite. Yeah, kill it with fire. I need to get a drink. Why not? Oh, hey, that went well. Usually I only make it through those things by the skin of my teeth. You know, I don't think I've ever bothered to look up, like, what's the most effective combo or, like, loadout for dead cells. I don't think... One of the coolest things about Dead Cells is that regardless of how you play, you're going to have fun. It is a very difficult game to not enjoy playing. And not all games are like that. Some games are not like that on purpose. Like, you have all kinds of games. Oh, no. No, that's not what I thought it was. My eye is really bothering me tonight. I hate those egg-laying enemies. You have all kinds of modern games with these monetization nonsense gobbledygook, what have you. Dracula's Castle, you say? Sure, why not? I've said before that, one time my grandmother smacked me in the side of the face so hard that I lost sight in my eye. This was that eye. Bloodthirsty Shield, Sapphire Amulet, Wave of Denial. Freezes enemies. Oh, well, if downward smash attacks burn the ground. I gotta take that. That increases my red. Well, I'm gonna try, lady. Alright, let's go through the castle. Isn't that natural? Isn't that just always how it is? Even the walls seem to judge you. Oh, switching. Stop it. Let's go with tactics again. That was so close. That was skin of my teeth. Wow. Fiction. I don't know how well you can see him, but he's there. Wow. I think I might die here. In Dracula's castle. only have one more. I have to use it when the time is right. Sexy. Sexy. Is he just doing kitty stuff? I don't know if you can hear Switch, but he is in fact doing kitty stuff. Oh, I remember this. You fight death first. I'm gonna lose. Actually, I shouldn't be so pessimistic. Stop laughing at me. Wow, that was like a Dark Souls move. That was also like a Dark Souls move. Oh, I'm just not very good at this. Need practice. And Switchy is messing with my light. So I don't see any comments. No one's really interested in chatting as far as I can see. So I guess I'm going to call it a night tonight. I think this was productive. I think that I got a lot done. That's the kind of informative stream that I want to have more often. So, yeah, I'm going to call it here. I'm going to modify my schedule a bit. I don't think I can do streaming every day. At least not yet. There's so much stuff going on in my life right now. And my attention is being grabbed every which way. And I need to focus on some things to the exclusion of others. I absolutely am not going to be able to do streaming on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So, like, that's right out. But Thursdays should be good. Fridays should be good. Mondays should be fine. I'll try three times a week, maybe 4 times a week. I don't know. So, yeah. That's all I have to say. I am all Sade out. Until next time, go out and do something important, and take care of yourselves, alright?